Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to kick off today's presentation on user management. Today, we'll explore key concepts and best practices to help you effectively manage users within your systems. Over the next few slides, we'll cover topics like user roles, permissions, and security measures. So, let's get started and dive into the world of user management. So, let's talk about what a user is in Salesforce. Essentially, a user is anyone who logs into the system. This includes your employees like sales reps, managers, and IT specialists who need access to your company's records. But it's not just internal staff. External users such as customers, prospects, and partners can also be users if they access your Experience Cloud sites. Now, for every user, there is a corresponding user account. Think of this as their unique identity within Salesforce. It helps the system recognize and distinguish each user. The user account also controls what features and records they can access based on the settings you configure. Each user account has some key pieces of information. There's the username, which is unique to that user. Their email address, which is important for notifications. You can also include their first and last names, though the first name is optional. Then there's an alias and a nickname, which are handy for quick identification. Beyond that, the user account specifies the license type, which defines what features are available. The profile associated with the account determines what the user can see and do within Salesforce. And optionally, you can assign a role, which helps with record-level access and hierarchy within your organization. Understanding these aspects is essential because it helps us control access, ensure security, and tailor the experience for each user. So, in summary, a user in Salesforce is anyone who logs in, whether internal or external, and their account settings define what they can access and do within the system. Let's talk about usernames first. Each user needs both a username and an email address. The username should look like an email address and must be unique across the entire Salesforce organization. It can actually be the user's email address, as long as it's unique. Moving on to user licenses. These licenses determine what features a user can access in Salesforce. For example, if you want your users to access standard Salesforce features and chatter, you can assign the standard Salesforce license. But if you need to restrict access to only certain features, there are various licenses available. For instance, if you want a user to access chatter but not see any data in Salesforce, you can give them a chatter-free license. Now let's discuss profiles. Every user has one profile that sets the default permissions and settings. Profiles help define what the user can see and do. However, the best practice is to assign a basic profile like minimum access Salesforce, and then use permission sets or permission set groups to give users additional permissions as needed. This approach keeps things flexible and manageable as your user needs evolve. These key concepts, usernames, licenses, and profiles, are fundamental to controlling access and ensuring users have the right tools for their roles, which ties back to our overall goal of secure and efficient user management in Salesforce. Let's talk about roles. Roles determine what users can see in Salesforce based on their position in the role hierarchy. Typically, users at the top of the hierarchy can see all the data owned by users below them. In contrast, users at lower levels can't see the data owned by those above them or in other branches, unless sharing rules explicitly grant them access. It's important to note that roles are optional, but each user can have only one role assigned. If you have a large organization, assigning roles when adding new users can make management easier. Of course, you can also set up a role hierarchy and assign roles at any time later on. Keep in mind that roles are only available in certain editions of Salesforce, including Professional, Enterprise, Unlimited, Performance, and Developer editions. Now, moving on to aliases. An alias is simply a short, easy-to-remember name used to identify a user on list pages, reports, or other places where their full name might be too long. By default, the alias is made up of the first letter of their first name and the first 4 letters of their last name. These key points help us understand how user visibility and identification are managed within Salesforce, supporting a more organized and secure environment. Now, let's take a closer look at the comparison between permission sets and profiles. On this slide, we see a table that highlights the key differences. First, permission sets primarily deal with user, object, and field permissions, as well as things like custom permissions and connected app access. They allow us to add specific permissions to a user without changing their overall profile. Profiles, on the other hand, define default record types, default assigned apps, page layout assignments, and login hours. Think of profiles as the baseline settings for a user's overall access. When it comes to what should go into a permission set versus a profile, the rule of thumb is use profiles for the broad, baseline access levels that are common across users with similar roles. Permission sets are more flexible and are best suited for granting additional, specific permissions on top of the profile. For example, if you want all users in a certain role to have access to a particular app, that's a profile setting. But if only some users need access to a specific feature or object, that's where permission sets come in. This way, permission sets give you granular control without creating a need for multiple profiles. By understanding this distinction, you can better manage user access efficiently and securely, aligning with the overall theme of streamlined, flexible permission management. Now, let's look at some key guidelines for adding users in Salesforce. First, each user must have a username that's unique across the entire platform. Think of it like a unique identifier that no one else can have. The username needs to be in the format of an email address, such as jdo@domain.com. However, it doesn't have to be a real email address, so you can use a placeholder as long as it's unique. Next, regarding email addresses, multiple users can have the same email address, even across different organizations. This provides flexibility if, for example, multiple users share a work email. When it comes to passwords, users are required to change their password the first time they log in. This helps ensure security from the start. And about the login process, users will receive a login link in their sign-in email, but they can only use that link once. If they follow the link but don't set a password, you, as the admin, will need to reset their password before they can log in again. Overall, these guidelines help keep your user management secure, organized, and flexible, aligning with our goal of effective system administration. Now, let's talk about how you can control access to data in Salesforce. There are 4 main levels at which you can configure this. First, at the organization level, which sets the broadest level of access for the entire company or organization. Next, we have object-level access, which determines whether users can see or interact with specific objects like accounts or contacts. Then, fields-level access allows you to control visibility and editing rights for individual fields within those objects. Finally, records-level access gives you precise control over specific records, so you can restrict or grant access to individual data entries. Understanding these levels is crucial because they form the foundation of how you secure and manage data access in Salesforce, aligning with your overall data governance strategy. Let's start with organization access. At the highest level, you can secure your organization by maintaining a list of authorized users, setting strong password policies, and controlling login access based on hours and locations. This helps ensure only the right people can get in and reduces the risk of unauthorized access. Moving on to objects, object-level security is a straightforward way to control who can access specific data. By setting permissions on particular types of objects, you can prevent certain users from creating, viewing, editing, or deleting records within those objects. For example, you might want interviewers to view positions and applications, but not have the ability to modify or delete them. To manage these permissions effectively, we recommend using permission sets and permission set groups. They give you a flexible way to assign and organize access controls across your users. Finally, when we talk about levels of data access, it's about controlling how much data a user can see or modify. The key takeaway is that by carefully configuring these layers, organization, object, and data access, you create a secure environment that aligns with your overall security strategy. This integrated approach helps protect sensitive information while empowering your users with the right level of access. Now, let's talk about fields. Field-level security is all about controlling access to specific fields within an object, even if a user has access to the object itself. For example, you might want to hide the salary field on a position object from interviewers, but still allow hiring managers and recruiters to see it. It's a way to keep sensitive information protected. These permissions are managed through permission sets as well. Moving on to records. When you need even more precise control, record-level access becomes important. You can allow users to view an entire object, but then restrict which individual records they can see or edit. A good example is interviewers seeing only their own reviews, so they can view and update their reviews, but not access others. To set the default level of access across the organization, we use organization-wide defaults. From there, we can refine access further using role hierarchies, sharing rules, manual sharing, and other sharing features to open up access where needed. Finally, understanding levels of data access is key. It's about balancing security with usability by choosing the right level of visibility for each user, depending on their role and needs. This layered approach helps us protect sensitive data while still enabling productivity and collaboration across teams. Permission sets are essentially collections of settings and permissions that define what users can do within Salesforce. They allow you to grant access to specific objects, fields, tabs, and other features without having to alter a user's profile. This makes managing permissions much more flexible and efficient. So what's so great about permission sets? Well, because you can reuse smaller, modular permission set building blocks, you avoid the need to create dozens or even hundreds of profiles for different users or job functions. It's a much more scalable approach. That's why we recommend assigning users the minimum access Salesforce profiles. Then, you can extend or modify their access using permission sets and permission set groups. This approach keeps your permissions streamlined, manageable, and tailored to each user's needs. It ties right back into our overall goal of making access control both secure and easy to manage. Permission set groups are exactly what they sound like, groups of permission sets. They allow you to bundle permission sets together based on a specific job persona or role. This makes managing permissions much easier because instead of assigning multiple individual permission sets to each user, you can assign just one permission set group. When you do that, the user automatically gets all the permissions from every permission set within that group. What really makes permission set groups powerful is their flexibility. You can include a permission set in more than one group, which means you can reuse permission sets across different roles without creating duplicates. Plus, you have the option to mute specific permissions within a group, so you can prevent certain permissions from being granted to users even if they're part of that group. When you combine all of these capabilities, it becomes a very efficient way to manage permissions. It helps ensure that your users only have the permissions they need for their jobs, without the hassle of cloning dozens or even hundreds of profiles to replicate the same setup. Permission set groups streamline the process, making permission management more scalable and less error-prone. Now, let's talk about how you can control data access with even greater precision. You see, it's not just about allowing users to view an entire object, it's about being specific. You can grant certain users permission to see an object as a whole, but then restrict what individual records within that object they can actually access. This gives you a much finer level of control, tailored to different roles and responsibilities. As we mentioned earlier, organization-wide defaults, or OWD, set the baseline level of access for users when it comes to records they don't own. Think of OWD as the starting point. It's the default setting that applies across the organization. From there, you can build on that foundation with more granular sharing rules to fine-tune who sees what. Understanding how to set these defaults is key to managing data securely while still enabling collaboration. It's all about balancing accessibility with control, ensuring the right people see the right information at the right time. let's talk about how to determine the organization-wide defaults for sharing. The key is to ask some important questions for each object. First, think about who is the most restricted user for that object. Who is the user that should have the least access? Then, consider if there might be any instances of this object that this user shouldn't see at all. It's important to identify those cases. Next, ask if there could be any instances where this user shouldn't be allowed to edit the object. These questions help us set the default sharing rules in a way that aligns with our security and access needs. Remember, these organization-wide defaults serve as the baseline. From there, we can layer on more specific sharing rules if needed. By thoroughly evaluating these questions, we ensure that our data remains secure and accessible only to the right people, supporting our overall data governance strategy. Now, let's take a closer look at the different sharing model options for our records. First, we have the private setting. In this case, only the record owner and users above that role in the hierarchy can view, edit, and report on those records. This gives a very controlled level of access. Next is the public read-only option. Here, all users can view and report on the records, but editing is restricted. Only the owner and users above that role in the hierarchy can make changes. This is useful when you want broad visibility but limited editing rights. Moving on, we have the public read-write setting. This is the most open model, where all users can view, edit, and report on all records. It encourages collaboration, but also requires careful management of permissions. Finally, there's the controlled by parent option. With this, a user's ability to view, edit, or delete a record depends on whether they can perform those same actions on the parent record. It's a way to automatically inherit permissions from related records, maintaining consistency. Understanding these sharing models is key to managing access effectively, ensuring the right people have the appropriate level of control over your data, all while supporting your overall data governance strategy. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I really appreciate you being here and engaging with the material. I hope that the key points we've discussed, from the initial challenges to the strategies for success, have given you valuable insights. Remember, the main goal is to apply these ideas effectively in your own work or projects. Connecting everything back to the overall theme, I want to emphasize that understanding these concepts is crucial for making informed decisions and driving positive outcomes. Again, thank you for your participation. I look forward to seeing how you implement these ideas moving forward.